Welcome to the Woman Who Rubs the Mountain podcast, a gathering place for conversations and stories of ecological embodiment. I'm your host and guide, Kendra Ward. So let us gather ourselves here together, centering as we tune into our intent. What happens when we rub on the body of the earth? How does she brush back against us? Here we seek an intimacy, a love affair with the land and beings where we live. Let us come together in creative, strange, disruptive ways of relating, beyond the human-centric limitations of our current dreaming. By sharing experiences of embodied ecology, our reality shifts, our core truths sharpen, and space is made for a new, old, earth-honoring culture to reemerge. So I am very honored and grateful to be here in conversation today with Rivka Honeybee Worth. Rivka is a somatic educator, embodiment coach, and dance facilitator. She grew up talking to trees, rocks, and flowers, and she still does. Her love of dance and nature come together in her body of work, Eco-Soma, devoted to rebuilding healthy relationships with nature through embodied practice. As an Earth ambassador, Rivka shares eco-somatic practices that support listening, presence, and renewal through physical and sensory bonding in the natural world. She is one of Australia's leading experts in conscious dance practice and has devoted the past 30 years to facilitating dance and embodiment with a diversity of people. She is also a certified 5 rhythms teacher, a certified futuring principles facilitator and training, which I'm very excited to hear about, and has worked extensively in community cultural development, improvisation practice, early childhood movement, and as a professional choreographer. Her current long-term project is as co-director of In Your Arms, a sensory performance project tending to the relationship between new babies and the natural world, which sounds absolutely beautiful and tender and fascinating. So thank you so much, Rivka, for being with me here today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, I'm just feeling very aware of the preciousness and also sort of the strangeness of us meeting in the polarity this way, since it's morning for you and evening for me and spring for you and fall for me. And it's just I'm kind of enjoying the weird timeless aspect of that. Um, and it feels almost like we're only in conversation because of the will and wisdom of the spark and the electricity and the old dreaming of the earth and sort of the rocks and the minerals through these computers, like bringing us here together in this in between.
Mm.
So
Mm. And also just that, like you said, across the time, but the virtual distance that, how we just find each other. We find our people, our tribe, when you contacted me and I read about you, it's like, oh yes, this is one of my people. We just through the mycelium networks, through the virtual, we can still make these connections. So I love that.
yeah.
Someone I don't know would reach across from the other side of the world and go, hey, we speak the same language and we rubbing up in similar ways. So yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for reaching out to me.
I am very excited to hear more about the ways in which you're gathering all this together because it feels like it's been maybe quite the evolution and also just entirely heart-led practice. But I'd love to just begin um, by sort of grounding in place and hearing a little bit more about um, the land where you are. And you sent me a picture of the wildflowers blooming a few weeks back, and just feeling into how you're rubbing and finding intimacy with the land where you are in an everyday, maybe even a storytelling sort of way too.
Mm, mm. Well, I like to begin and always acknowledge the traditional owners of this place, who are the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin tribe, and acknowledge the ancestors, the past, present, and emerging of the place where I am here. And this is where I am here is about 40 minutes out of sort of central Melbourne, on the fringes by the river. And this is home mostly for now, while my son is finishing high school. And this is like my urban home, where I grow the veggies and walk in the park, and you'll probably hear some of the birds. And then my other home is some land, which is where I sent you the flowers from. Some land that my partner and I recently became custodians of. So we're responsible for this protected land that's on Taungurung Country, which is about an hour and a half out of Melbourne. So those flowers are just blooming out there, and that's a place where I spend as much time as I can. There's about 115 acres, which I think is, I don't know if your acres, or 46 hectares. So it's a large trust for nature property that is protected wildlife, flora and fauna. And yeah, that's where I do most of my, I'm here. It's interesting, actually. I was reflecting on this the other day, like most of my research and work, and when I go into the zone, but yet I'm here in this place, and I often forget that I can do that here in the more domesticated backyard,
Mm-hmm.
So I find that interesting, and yeah, how I relate to different places depending on their location.
Mm-hmm. Any kin, or oftentimes I like to sort of call in just someone that I've noticed during the day, or someone that I feel is really kind of informing my life, or I'd like to say sort of informing our conversation today. I'm wondering if anyone in particular is,
Mm.
that you've been noticing, feeling into
Mm.
lately.
Oh, so many beings.
Hmm.
Even just like right behind me, the tree ferns here, they're some of my dearest friends. And we speak every morning and sometimes sing. These tree ferns are very precious, precious beings. And my garden, I was just reflecting on this sort of more domestic space, and planted lots of summer veggies yesterday, and just talking to all those little seedlings, the baby little dills and corianders and cucumbers and the little veggie seedlings. Like, for me, plants are definitely an ally. And so I was looking out the kitchen window this morning and just saying hello, and how they're just beginning to burrow their roots down, into the fresh soil, come from the market, and now they're here in home, and just helping them land and listening to them as they settle into their new home. And then out on the land, the other day I was walking, and literally, like, I was just sort of above the branch in my head, like the most beautiful wedge-tail eagle just flew out of the tree over my head. I was just like, hello, I haven't met you before. So the land is quite new, so the birds out there are incredible. And eagle and I have a particular connection, and it was just such a beautiful welcoming, felt like. And I just sat there and watched, just looked up, and there was a little baby, and they were just circling and circling and flying. Just excited by this new family to meet in this land that's just been doing its own thing for the last 100 years or so. It's like I'm the stranger, I'm the newcomer, and just settling quietly into who's there, who am I meeting. And there's kookaburras and kingfishers and currawongs and fairy wrens and just, yeah, wild ducks. And so there's a lot of beautiful birds yet to meet. So we're just gently crossing paths. And yeah,
That's exciting.
yeah, it is.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to hear, in your own words, you explain or tell us what Eco-Soma means to you, and what that Especially I'm curious or would love to feel into this sense of like skin to skin, and the like unexpected freshness, um, of being skin to skin.
Beautiful. Well, that's one of my favorite things, skin to skin with earth, and eco being environment, being land, being the ecosystem, and being nature, the natural world, and soma, the body, my body, your body, physical body, and how together that relationship is exactly that, our skin, my skin of my body, and the skin of the earth. And sometimes that's the ground, sometimes that's the moss, sometimes that's a tree, a rock, the beings that are in the space wherever we are, like you just located, help me locate myself here. The skin to skin relationship is about locating really physical presence in space, physical presence with wherever we find ourselves. So even just noticing, as I say that, I'm like, oh yeah, I can feel my pelvis on the ground. There's some touch, and there's a meeting place. It's not just me sitting on the ground. The ground is also feeling me above it, so that it's a meeting place. Or when I'm perhaps meeting a tree and speaking to a tree about possibility of some touch, some conscious touch. It's not just me touching the tree. It's like in any relationship, that touch is coming together between us. So that meeting place for me is the skin to skin. And the meeting place is about relationship. So it's about, like any good, healthy relationship that we, hopefully learn in our adult lives, about deep listening. It's about consent. It's about conscious touch. It's about space for both to be present. So the relationship for me is what's really most important in the skin to skin. And then physically, the play in that is what I love. So feeling that connection. So like lying on my back and sensing into like my sympathetic nervous system, what's coming in, what am I receiving, that information. Or maybe lying on my belly in my parasympathetic, just resting and feeling that digestion of information and connection in with the earth and what's below the surface and all that sort of wow, yummy, fertile parasympathetic. I could go on and on about how this is for me, but that interplay between, Eco-Soma is really finding the connection between our bodies and the body of earth, and that real sometimes cellular physical connection. Like where are the connections between how I'm breathing, what's happening in my lungs, in the tissue of my lungs, in the actual physiology of my lungs, right down to the capillary beds of respiration, and how that is also happening in the leaves, and how when we can learn about what's happening in our body and learn about, there's this like, oh, we can breathe together. So it again creates a relationship through that awareness of somatically what's happening in our bodies and somatically what's happening in the beings that we're with. Yeah, it's probably enough right now. I could go on and on, but yeah,
it's beautiful. Yeah. Well, and I appreciate your way of feeling into just into the relationship aspect of it. I've noticed that oftentimes we bring, whatever kind of we bring to any like human relationship, we sometimes also will tag that along in any other relationship with the living world. Like, for example, if it's hard for us to, open up to other humans, and we also bring that same sort of closed offness or difficulty in opening our heart to other beings. So yeah, it's fascinating what we what we bring to all of our relationships, really.
And we can practice too. We can practice some of those skills that we might want to be learning or growing in ourselves, in relationship to ourselves and in relationship to others, through those connections with non-human beings. Where people like me, that's often easier than with human species, but it certainly helps and supports me then in all my relations.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to just hear you speak a little bit more on some other work that you're involved in, futuring, which I know very little about. So, yeah, I'm curious.
Yeah, futuring is it's a practice, I would say, that actually requires a lot of presencing. It sounds like it's not now, but it actually is. It's very much, like futuring is a wave. It's an energetic wave or a frequency, feeling into the sort of larger field, the quantum field, and that is accessed through a real presence and stillness in the now, through really arriving where we are. That's that's a space to be able to feel that emptiness or that field and sense into what might be happening already, what might be happening that we're not seeing yet or that we don't understand yet, but it is already unfolding. That space where we don't have the facts, we can't sort of pin it down, and there isn't even necessarily, well, there probably is a bit of science now, but it's still, not as tangible as other certain things that might be right now. So through feeling into that potential of what could be and that expansiveness of what could be, we can also send out those waves of what we want to create or what we're already envisioning, but through already a feeling. It's like almost like the energy of futuring is already letting us know, and so we're connecting to that which we don't know. If that makes sense. Sounds like a riddle. So it crosses time, like we spoke about at the beginning. I think you introduced this as you said something in the introduction about the new old world. And that's a futuring language, it's futuring concept, because like a lot of Indigenous cultures, there's a time crossing or time running, call it here, where the past, the present, and the future is is more of a circle than a linear path. And so simultaneously there's culture happening, there's story happening, there's myth happening, and there's even some of our new ways are returning to the old ways, and the old ways have created the new ways. So it's futuring is like this continuum of time. And I think and I feel like where we're moving and evolving to very much is like so many of the old traditions and the old sort of forecasting that comes from ancient tradition is where we are now. So they were already futuring. So we can sometimes look back to know where we're going. And Barbara Marx Hubbard is a futurist. She recently passed. I don't know if you've heard of her. And she talks about conscious evolution. And she talks about us evolving as a new species, that we're actually in a transition from Homo sapiens to Homo universalis. I think she calls it Amore universalis, but that we're actually in a transition of changing our humanness, which I find so cool. And that it's through conscious evolution, through who and how we've been as people interacting with the world around us, is how we're evolving into where we're going collectively. And so much of that for me is about our interaction with the natural world and how everything that we do, you know, our how we exist, what we take, what we leave, you know, all our bio waste, all our actual waste, like all of that relational stuff is how we're, as a whole planet, you know, moving forward into our collective future. Bit of a curly answer, but it's different to, you know, how people practice manifesting. It is similar in a sense of like envisioning something and feeling that, but it's tuning in a much more collective way. It's really feeling where we're all moving to as a coexisting with all beings and humans and natural world beings and plant and animal beings. And for me, that's the conscious evolution, like how when we begin to work more harmoniously, which we're already doing, even just the fact that these conversations, as you have a podcast on this topic, you know, the fact that this is where we are now, that interrelational aspect of everyone existing, all things existing, is part of how we're all moving forward and evolving. That is the new future or the new world, or the different names people are calling where we're heading. For me, that's about this remembering and opening and cultivating connection and relationship with the place we live in, which, you know, so many of us are so separate from. So many people have separate lives to outdoor lives or natural. It's just so distinctly separation. That's the evolution or the revolution. That's the change that's happening as people realize, oh, I'm affected by what happens out there in the weather, in the garden, with what I eat. And that every single thing that we have has all come from the natural world. I think that's forgotten. This computer, I mean, it's all come from planet Earth at some point. We've created it and put some things together, but originally all our materials are natural materials. I think it's easy to forget that.
Very easy. Yeah.
It's like, here I am at work and then I'll go camping, or, you know, I'm going to look at the moon, but then I'm going to put on the telly. But it's all originally from that natural source.
Or even just our terminology of, I'm going to get out in nature.
Yes.
You know, or I'm going to go to the river as my self-care plan. And, you know, it can be so much more than that. There's so much more potential than just treating the earth as our emotional support planet, but instead, you know, that the relationship could be so much more rich and, you know, reciprocal. It could be so much more, like just in hearing you talk about the meeting of the two surfaces, you know, in that skin to skin, like that the coming together in presence, and just the richness of that, you know, of being in a different kind of relationship or way of being and thinking, which sounds like the futuring. I mean, it sounds like it makes a lot of sense to me. But I appreciate like the difficulty of even putting these things in words too. You know, it's not such an easy thing to do. Yeah, well, I know that this feels tied to another question for me. You know, I know that music and rhythm and vibration, like these are portals, gateways of expression for you and connection. And so I'd love to feel into a little bit more, like you mentioned, kind of myth, these beyond human language, music and symbols and myth and storytelling, all existing and seeming to be more capable potentially of expressing animacy, these animate forces that move through everything. Instead of like breaking beyond just our human language. So yeah, curious to explore that a little bit more with you, language beyond just our human language.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think vibration and sound, and sometimes even maybe things we don't have a name yet for, when communicating with non-human beings. It's that space of presencing that we're talking about, to be able to listen even when we're not exactly sure what we're listening for. So through listening through, like embodied listening through cells and through skin, even listening, deeper through like my organs, I can begin to tune into sound and frequency of non-human beings without always knowing, mostly not knowing exactly what's being said, but having that sensory feeling. And so that's part of the movement expression that comes back, or that dialogue where I don't even have to say words, maybe I do, but I'm moving with that communication, let's say, the sound. And from there, I begin to get a bit of a sense of maybe what's being communicated. I know it's a little bit different to what you're asking about music, but it's a different sort of music, I think, to tune into the sound around. So like I can hear the birds outside as sort of background sound right now. But if I was to spend a bit more time listening with all my senses, listening with my whole body as a sense organ, I would start to receive that in new ways. And whether that's through my dance or writing, or when I tell you about it, whatever part of that process, I'm like, oh, I'll learn something, or I'll remember something, and that might be in my human language, through that meeting of the sound. That's natural sound. And I think when I bring in other music in, sometimes live musicians, or there's such beautiful music, so much beautiful music in the world to bring in, that supports a different way of getting out of the head, I think, getting out of the thinking mind, and the sort of humanizing of trying to understand things, to have a more feeling sense. And it can be a great way for people to access what's happening inside their bodies when there's some support of music to come in, and then from that music bridge over to what's the music that we're hearing just actually happening naturally anyway. I've got very sensitive hearing, that sort of got what it's called, it's the audio clairvoyance. It has a name.
Okay.
I can't remember it right now, my brain's gone. I was too busy in the bird world. I was singing. So yeah, I've noticed sound a lot, and for me, it is. It's rhythm, it's music, it's harmony, but it's also communication. And that's even where the futuring plays in. Sometimes I might be listening to a tree, which is, the sound is like a lot more subtle, to tune into tree sound, tree language, and then these messages, these beautiful offerings, these gifts of things that are, have definitely are coming from, I would say, the future of like what's needed, what's being asked. And yeah, that's not a language that I know, or a language that I can say this is. I mean, I might call it tree speak, but it's just me putting a label on it. But it's the information, the communication that comes from presencing and relation, and being able to create that field of potential through listening, through connection, through skin to skin. Just in the same way, skin to skin with a mother and baby. We mentioned that project I'm working on. Like, there's a communication happening there where we don't really know what the babies are saying, or a pet even, if you have a close animal. But yeah, that skin to skin relationship with another being that you don't understand the words of, there's all these other ways that you listen to the sounds, or you listen to the touch, you listen to the skin tone, or the quality of movement. And there's all this other communication happening that you can begin to sort of get a sense of what might be happening with the baby without them saying, hey, I'm cold. you understand.
Yeah. That reminds me of Wendell Berry's "Be Famous for 5 miles," and I'd like to turn that into love everything for 5 miles, meaning like really love on and know your 5 miles, and love it in every season and every weather, and love it like you'd know your newborn's cries, to love it, or to know your beloved's freckle pattern, or to love on something and to notice, and to to slow down, like when you using that sense of like awe, to sink in and just to listen to that level. It's really, really different. I have been in I only lived where I'm living now for the last year, and I have been in a tender new relationship with this creek. And I know that this land where I am, as much of the land in this state where I live, has been deforested and has a history of harm. And I can feel with the creek that it's like a very tenuous sort of like there's healing to be had, but also that no one has sort of tried to be in relationship in a slow, present, loving sort of way. And I got this just this sort of feeling that everything is sort of deeply sleeping. Like the energies have really sunk down. And I just got this feeling of using bells, using chimes, using vibration as a way to sort of like greet the creek. And I can't even tell you how profound, like the use of vibration and sound as it ripples through the forest, but particularly, for the creek. I am honestly like amazed in that moment how big of a difference it makes, like of just how everything feels entirely different. So yeah, it's something really easy to take for granted, the power of sound and vibration. But I think it's another way of moving beyond thinking about like communication or relationship can only come from I don't know, just the human ways that we approach things, from our tongues or from our heads, or and continually practicing, finding other ways of relating.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Wendell Berry, there's another farmer poet, Wendell Berry. He asked this question, what are people for? And it is a big one. I actually asked my 13-year-old daughter this question a few weeks ago, and I can't actually remember how she responded. You could tell it was like it stopped. I think it
Yeah.
stops adults
Yeah.
too.
Mm,
But but even just feeling into the tension of the question, I think is useful.
mm, mm,
So yeah, just curious if you have um, any feelings about that
mm,
inquiry.
yes, I've been thinking about this too. It's yeah, it's like a chasing its tail question, because we're the ones that, we answer it for ourselves. I mean, I think evolution, like I mentioned before, how that relationship with what we're putting in and what we're taking out, like we're definitely influencing evolution, but we don't know what would be happening if we weren't here. So whether we're needed for that or it's just interesting, I don't know.
Mm,
I don't know what, I'm sure that things will keep growing without us. I'm sure that the planet will keep thriving, but it will be different with us in the mix. It already is, for good or for bad. But this conscious evolution that I was talking about before, that Barbara speaks about, is very much about how we have the potential to make those influences to evolve beyond what we know as a planet. So I guess it's potential.
mm,
Humans are for potential of how we can change and grow, and that potential might not, we evolve from that. Well, everything evolved from this sort of single cell, amoebas, and we grew into these creatures that we are today. And so without us, I'm just wondering how would evolution be? It would be different. It would be different. And the other thing I was thinking about with this question is how we're the storytellers, like we're history keepers,
mm,
and recorders, and creatures are doing that as well. There's definitely, in the DNA of beings and plants, and in their tissue memory and imaginal cells, like there is that happening as well. So that's not just us, but I think that's a big part of being human, that we're storytellers, and we carry and record memory in that way. Sometimes in ways we don't want to, carrying stuff in our, old stories in our bodies, but we do carry story.
yeah.
So yeah, as storytellers and story keepers, we're just adding a uniqueness, I think, to how we might remember, how this point in time in history might be remembered by who knows who when. Maybe we don't yet know, but without us here doing that, then those stories wouldn't be recorded in the same way of how we move forward. And I think I don't know why we're here, but I think we're meant to be here. I think we, like everything that's here, we're meant to be here. We've grown for a reason. We've developed these bodies for a reason, and we're a part of the picture. And maybe that's what being human's about, trying to actually work that out.
Mhm.
What is our true role here? I don't think we know that yet. Mm.
I'm curious about any thoughts you might have on the heaviness of the troubles that we're in, and this sense of not letting cynicism move us into this game over type of inaction, especially when it feels to me as if this sentiment is only based on this idea that only if things work do they matter. Like, only if we can fix it does it matter. And I'm wondering about
Mm.
how a practice of losing categories or losing structure, or losing a sense of certainty relates to us staying with these troubles.
Mm. Mm. Oh, such a rich, fertile question. Where to begin? I feel like acknowledging, like I said before, what we exist. So acknowledging what exists, like allowing that grief, that sadness, the rage, the mess, the destruction, like it to accept that things are happening. I think Joanna Macy's work offers a lot of this practice around, and creative practices around really feeling, because it's easy to bury our heads in the sand, or like you said, that feeling of hopelessness. So allowing like any situation to actually be real and to feel how that moves us on an individual level, but also collectively. So community, when well, for me, if I'm having like a really hard time with something, my pattern is to isolate with it. I'll go on my own, which usually, there's processes. I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but sometimes it is. Sometimes there's a lot of suffering in that. But through reaching out or connecting or sharing what I'm experiencing with someone, shifts it and makes some change for it to change. And so I think the same with this, with climate grief, with environmental grief, with so many crazy things happening around that just seem to be, it's overwhelming. That collectively to be feeling and moving and experiencing that with other people is really important. It creates, again, an opportunity to shift or change. Yeah. Not to mention is support, but I think it's more than that. I think it's the frequency of that, like we talked about, vibration of that, of community creates change. So moving with what is, for me, is about actually meeting what is. If I'm shaking and freaking out because of a situation that like my son, he listens to all the new, he's 16, he listens to he knows more about the news and what's happening in the world politically than I do, and he gets he gets overwhelmed with it, but he also, the details are important for him. So he'll come and talk to me about nuclear war potential stuff, which for him is very real. And so I was just giving this as an example. How to reassure him. I don't know. I can't say, oh, that'll never happen. No, I can't say that anymore. But what I can do is go into my body and into his body and be with, not into his body, but invite him to feel and sense what's going on. And whether he joins me or not, I can put on some heavy ass music and dance. And feel that through just whatever I'm feeling, and let him know that energy is okay in that, and or I might go, if there's another situation, I might just go and lie on, like the water is just coming here in Australia, like big floods, lots of floods, and that uncertainty of ground, and just spend time on the ground, spend time with the river, spend time feeling what it feels like to have water like whoosh through me, and to meet the feeling. And from that meeting, it's like, okay, there's less fear, and there's also like a sense of hope to how I might be creative in this situation. I'm not just feeling into my old pattern of what it means to respond to this situation. There's a newness. There's potential. We're talking a lot about potential today. I feel like there was something else I was going to say. What was the second part to what you said? Can you remind me?
About losing categories and structure and certainty.
Oh, yes. Thank you. Yeah. Again, the dance for me, one of my dear teachers, Gabrielle Roth, who founded the 5 rhythms, one of the 5 rhythms in the middle of the wave is called chaos. And we're definitely in a time of chaos. And when we dance chaos, we let it all fall apart. We let a mess happen. We're out of control, in a sense. We're uncontrolled, and we have to allow that breaking before we can move into the next rhythm, which is lyrical. And it's just such a beautiful way to live for me in the maps of her dance, because it's not until I can let go that I will find that beautiful sweetness, the joy of lyrical, of, you know, the sun coming out, or the like, oh yeah, this could be possible. This could be possible. And we can, but it's from that cracking open. So I think that's where we're at on a bigger scale. And we've been here a while, and we're probably still going to crack a bit. Because things have, you know, that life is breaking and forming and breaking and forming, and we're breaking. We have to break. And I don't think trying to fix in little ways is necessarily what we need. I think we do need to break a bit more. And from that, we will only be able to have new ways of being.
Thank you. Yeah, that's beautiful. I also feel just the tremendous amount of presence in you, just being whatever the energy, whatever that strong energy is moving through you at the time, and being with that instead of being in the wormholes of like something else, you know, of getting sucked. I mean, I feel like that's what so easily happens with the news, or just, you know, yes, like for your son wanting to have that information, it's, you know, it's understandable, but then also it is its own frequency and vibration that then is creating that reality, and, you know, really continuing to be sovereign in our own spaces, and in our story of what's happening, and just what we're immediately present with. So I just love your sense of, you know, moving with it, whatever strong energies, elemental energies, you know, are moving
and moving
through.
with it, it can, yeah, moving with and moving through, it can take the power, the heat off this thing that if we resist, you know, it becomes almost a separate entity to us and can really distort things. So it's meeting it exactly in the energy it's in, which is how I'll meet, you know, what I will intend to meet anything or anyone or any who I'm meeting the energy that's there, not bringing in my not bringing in anything that is extra to that initial meeting. And from there's something in that joining that creates the next thing.
Just out of total curiosity, I'd love to hear what the 5 rhythms are, like just as
flowing,
okay,
staccato, chaos, lyrical, stillness.
just letting those sink in for a moment. Thank you. Well, I'd love to just offer you the space to talk about anything that is really close to your heart right now, any offerings that you have going on. Yeah, just to talk about your work a little bit further.
Thank you. I've just finished, just stepped out of, I think it was about a 3-week intensive studying the work of Bonnie Bainbridge-Cohen. I don't know if you've heard of Bonnie. She's she founded Body Mind Centering somatic practice, and I've been studying her work for a long time, and now training as an educator, like so I can teach her work. And yeah, I think that the learning coming from that is very much about, I mean, lots of learnings, but where I'm sitting right now is about cellular consciousness and the just the incredibleness of our cells, and how we spend so much time in our brains trying to work this stuff out. Yes, buddies. And how when we can access ourselves, access the world, access each other, and where we are through cellular presencing and cellular touch, it's just like a whole new world. And that's where I'm really interested. You know, the cells that are in the plants, the cells that are in the soil, the cells in my little veggie seedlings, and my cells meeting, because it takes away all the other bullshit, if I'm allowed to say that. Like it's going right into the deep layers of the soil, you know, right into the deep layers of our skin. And that's where I hope to invite people in my work. So in the immersions, in the bush immersions, just getting ready to bring people out to the land. So the first time that will be this summer in a couple of months, for an immersion called Tree Codes, which is focused on introducing whoever comes to the beautiful box iron forest. There's all different box trees, ironbark forest, sorry. And spending time with the trees in different processes. So that cell to cell meeting will be key with that. And I also work, if people aren't in Australia, you know, I started Eco-Soma in the middle of lockdown. Like, I've been wanting to create this support people out into nature project. And we, you know, Melbourne, where I am, we were the longest lockdown in the world. We had a pretty, you know, closed down time. So it was a really interesting time to start this project, but it actually worked because people were at home. And so I was able to work with people online in there. Like you said, the 5 mile, we had a 5 kilometer, you couldn't walk further than 5 kilometers. You weren't allowed. And so I would encourage people out into their gardens or out for a walk, and I would offer through, you know, through the virtual, some supportive practices. So I thought that was awesome that began from that little seed. So that's continuing for people that want to work in that way, and trying to create some more just audio offerings people can tune into with, or, you know, without me as well. Yeah, my mission, my dream is to really support people outdoors into beautiful spaces, but to connect with space that they're in already, and to slow down and create space for those connections that will support us. Like, it's about supporting us. For me, it's about a sense of belonging. It's a sense of family and kin with non-human beings, and the wholeness of the world, like the whole cellular wholeness of the world. And I think that I see how that supports people feel more at home in their bodies, and more peaceful, and more agency to be who they are, and who they can, how they want to show up. And it's also, you know, not just for us, it's for, well, it's for all of us. The wholeness of how we relate and how we harmonizing the whole planet. So any way I can support people to just go, oh wow, I can slow down here and actually like feel who I am in relationship to where I am. Yeah, that's what's coming up. There's other things on the website at the moment. Most of it's face to face because it's so exciting to do that. But it's also just so easy to work with people online. And I am writing a book, so I'm wanting to spend more time. It's getting there. Spirit woke me up in the middle of the night and was just like, write this down. And I was like, okay. So now I did all that. Now I'm just trying to, okay, how do I make this something that other people can actually receive?
Beautiful. Well, that's exciting.
Yes. And the project In Your Arms with Babies. So that's inyourarms.org. And that's, that began as a performance project and then went online as well during lockdown time, and so it became an audio project, which was quite cool actually, working with these audioscape experiences for babies and caregivers. And we hope that if we can get some more funding, that will become a more alive, immersive performance experience.
Beautiful. It sounds really like a very creative, fascinating sort of exploratory. I can't wait to catch it. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It feels really important that really focusing on the youngest generation as a way to remember and reconnect with how we're in relationship to where we are.
Yeah.
Mm.
That makes sense.
Mm. So I get
Wow.
every month I get this email with this wild, I think they're called wild ferocious poems or something. So this is the one that came this morning. I thought I'd read it. It's
Beautiful.
very it was
Okay.
just so sweet. As I was waiting to begin the interview, I thought, oh, what have they sent me today? So it's by Joy Harjo.
Mhm.
Remember the plants, trees, animal life, who all have their families, their histories too. Talk to them, listen to them. They are alive poems.
Beautiful. Thank you for that.
Mhm.
It's a good closing. It's a good
Mm.
way to close. Well, thank you so much for sharing yourself this way with us. And just bringing your beautiful, unique gifts into the world this way.
Thank you. Thanks for creating this space to bring us all together. It's really
Mm.
important.
Mhm.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate you.
Yeah. Well, and much gratitude to everyone listening for spending this time with us as we make space for bountiful amounts of presence and awe as we find new ways of relating and being in kinship, as we continue to sink into our bodies, enmeshing ourselves entirely within this miraculous earth home. All right. Saying bye for now.